Nobody can hear me. And what we've done is we've talked to, like I said, to GSA, and OMB has actually been in on a couple of those discussions. But what it boils down to is not every state can buy off the GSA, nor do they want to. And that's one of the things. And the other thing is philosophically, the initiative that they're dealing with is a little different. Now, you got to take a look at it, and we brought up economics, and I'll talk about it more tomorrow. That's basically what I'm going to talk about. Sean, who I just roped into the CIO thing, is going to talk about the governance, which is more his bailiwick. Right, Sean? Okay. But really the initiative around the feds is two things. One of which is that Vivek wants to get as many things out to the cloud as possible because he wants to prove the concept. But I can tell you, because I was in D.C. last week, there's already hardening of the arteries in my mind, amongst the federal agencies because of the upcoming election cycle. They're already handicapping. I have no faith that GSA is going to get anything done that's going to be worthwhile in the truest sense. I don't mean to be really rude to them, but I'm going to say that up front because that's who I am. I'm pretty upfront with people. Bottom line is I think that this initiative has legs because guess what? States need to deal with it. That's what we have to do. And one of the things that Sean talked about was a collective nature now that's pervasive within state government thinking as well as locals. Why? Because we're broke. You know, as Churchill said, we're out of money. Now we have to start to think. The feds don't have to do that quite yet. Because the bottom line is that even though they're taking cuts, it's more politics than it is actually being driven by what their amount of money that they have to spend is. And that's not to say they are not taking real cuts. This is not that. I'm not saying that. But their incentive is much different than what we're trying to do. States, Montana, North Dakota, Texas, and some of the resource-rich states, their budgets are in pretty good shape. I think our ending balance is going to be $350 million, which is like unbelievable for this state. But yet we're still cutting. We cut 5%. I'd hate to see what you guys have cut, but the bottom line is the CIOs of the nation have said to themselves, we can't afford our own infrastructure anymore. I don't care if it's California or Texas or whoever, even though they have a boatload of cash, it's still a big IT infrastructure to support. So we're looking for new ways forward. And I guess just to round it back up, while we're not going to be enamored with what's going on with GSA, we're aware of it, and we're encouraging, better word, them to play a role in this. I've talked to EPA, I've talked to DOI, I've talked to them all, and they all know what I've done. I sit on the National Geospatial Advisory Committee, and I've made pitches repeatedly at those committee meetings about what we're doing and brought them up to speed. So I'm just saying is that GSA has an effort, but philosophically it's at a different place. Philosophically, they're at a different place in their political cycle and the way that they are going to go budget, by agency, as opposed to what's happening in the states, which is more collective. Most states' budgets are set up on the general fund, which equally impacts every agency, as opposed to appropriations at the federal level, which impacts that particular agency. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's why I think this has a lot of legs, and we're going to move forward. And no, I forgive you.
Other questions?
I'm not sure your forgiveness counts.
It's not what he tells me. Other questions? Just a quiet group. Cray? Go ahead.
My pat answer is yes and yes. So you mentioned a couple. Geocoding service is absolutely something we do for other state agencies. As an example, within our own state, we just recently ran 700,000 addresses for our Department of Human Services through our geocoding service and returned points and lat long to their database. And so they didn't have to do that. They didn't have to stand up infrastructure or a service to make that happen. And so I think those kinds of services would be very valuable to certainly other localities within Oregon. We're trying to get out the word that we have services like that geocoding service available to them. Certainly in other states, I think it would be the same. We haven't gotten very far in terms of specific applications, but certainly even with our conversations with ESRI over the last year or two, you have a worldwide organization. Even within the continent, within the United States, you work with virtually every state and local government that has GIS software installed, and it makes no sense for us, for 50 states, to continue to build identical applications or nearly identical applications, and nor does it make sense for the thousands of counties and cities that are out there. And so heretofore, we've had to confine our thinking to the boundaries of our own networks and the boundaries of our own data centers. And I think we now have an opportunity, bit by bit, again, I think we're going to continue to operate in a hybrid environment, but bit by bit to expose data, to create shared services environments, so to speak, where we at least have that opportunity, to share applications, to have vendors stand up and manage a software as a service application for one or more localities. So I don't know if I answered your question. Great. That's right. That's right. One quick follow-up to that, I would say certainly there's opportunities for revenue generation or for people to become a service center or a center of excellence. But even as a quick example, in Oregon, our primary mission within our geospatial enterprise office is geospatial data coordination, collection, management, sharing, those kinds of functions. It really, we're not staffed up to really do GIS web development or application development, and yet where data collection and coordination is concerned, we've had over the last 2 or 3 years a primary initiative to strike data sharing agreements with all of our 36 counties on the sharing of tax lot data. We're not like Montana, where we have a law that requires it. We have to strike these voluntary data sharing agreements. We had 3 or 4 Eastern Oregon counties who would not share data. They just didn't want to. They had concerns about liability until we offered them a tax lot web-based GIS application. And then we stood it up for them and showed them their own data, and they were so impressed they gave us their data without an agreement. There is a potential for revenue generation. There's also a barter system that could be unbelievable within our own jurisdictions that could be stood up by providing people with capabilities they never had and can never get on their own, and essentially trading the things of value that we all can offer.
Okay. Cray?
I would put that in the future amendment portion of the agreement. I think for now we're most concerned with how are we going to govern this procurement, and how are we going to govern the participation and involvement of our own states to make this aggregate model happen and to make it more feasible. As Robin indicated, the traditional approach is to come to the marketplace and to offer a potential opportunity, but not guarantee anything. And so we've got a lot of work to do amongst even the 4 states to get to a point where we can definitively commit certain data volumes, certain areas of use, commitments for use of the cloud environment in order to get preferred and reduced pricing from our vendor partners. So the things you mentioned, I think, are downstream, but we're starting with the procurement and again, starting with how we might be able to solidify a relationship with one another and enable future collaboration.
Yeah, I think maybe to make this a little bit clear, sorry, John, we see this as, we'll start with infrastructure as a service. I mean, that's where this whole effort will start. But what's being discussed is these potentials as we move forward, the software as a service and all of these things that we've talked about. We do see that in the future. We will start, we'll dip our toe in the water first and see how cold it is and kind of move from there. But we do need some experience in this area. So I want to be a little careful we don't overblow this, at least to start with. We'll start slowly, but move ahead very, very quickly. John?
So at the risk of overblowing this.
Yeah, I set you up again, didn't I?
And again, just to reiterate what Sean and Robin have said, that we need to answer a lot of questions through this process and figure out how we do work together and how we move forward. And even for the state of Colorado, there are some very specific questions that we need to figure out, how we engage in a 4-state partnership and all that kind of stuff, how we take money in and how we have the authority to spend it or not spend it. You talk about revenue generating. That said, I think there is an interest among states to look at similar type of model for data acquisition, maybe in the area of imagery or that sort of thing. But that is down the road, and we do want to sort of see how this goes first, and then say, okay, now that we've addressed some of these questions, can we apply it to these other areas?
Kim? Yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
So we've done a lot of work in Oregon, and my state CIO, Dugan Petty, is leading this charge in collaboration with the CIOs from the other 3 states. There have been multiple calls to date, and we're hopeful that the next version of the draft charter for the governance group will be in place yet today. And so tomorrow we'll be talking about that governance charter, the roles and responsibilities of the parties as we see them today, the membership, and our shared responsibility to one another. So we're at that point where we've got it on paper and are in, I think, the final stages of refinement. Again, we'll focus on the procurement, and we'll focus on the development of this aggregated purchasing model. Certainly other facets of the long-term governance, once the contract is put in place, I think that's yet to come.
Okay. Other questions? Bob?
So I'm dangerous at best. So I'm going to leave your specific question to the experts that are in the room from my team and that are sitting to my left, your right. But generally speaking, I can give an example today in our own environment in Oregon. Our statewide aerial imagery data sets are stored at our state data center, and yet the application or the system through which we provide the world access to that aerial imagery actually resides at Oregon State University. So that is, in my mind, I mean, that application could reside in a cloud environment in Colorado or New York or anywhere in the world. So there's an example of the different facets of cloud computing. Infrastructure as a service, we've got that key data set housed internally. It doesn't have to be, and in fact, I think imagery and data sets like it really have been one of the key drivers for us collectively even looking at cloud computing, because those data sets are so large. And so that's one example I can give, but again, I would
Dave?
turn it over.
Yes.
Just on top of Bob's comments, from the GIS perspective, our propensity will be to get as much out there as we can because we're interested in distributing it as widely as we can. And so that's, I mean, we're definitely interested in seeing how far we can push it.
John?
So quick follow-up to that. So while aerial imagery and data sets like it are the primary candidates for placing in the cloud, again, I come back to one of my original statements about wanting to learn more about the business model of you all as cloud services providers on data download. We have millions of hits, hundreds of thousands of data downloads of these kinds of data sets, and we have no control over who accesses the information. That said, we can meter, by user the amount of data they may download in a single download, but over time we don't have control of that. And so from a financial perspective, an economic perspective, what we place in the cloud will largely be driven by your pricing and service model. So please keep that in mind as well.
Other questions? We're running way ahead of schedule. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, we will have another question-answer period at the very end when we do the recap on tomorrow afternoon. So that will give you another opportunity to ask questions, particularly more towards the next step and what occurred during this session. So let's do this since we are a little ahead. Hold on just a minute. We have Amazon up next. Let's go ahead and take a break until 20 after. I have about 9 o'clock right now. Let's give them 20 minutes to get prepared and be back in here, and we'll go from there. Could I have all of the core team members over on this corner for about 2 minutes, please? Dick, you too.